Week 16. Can you see what's behind me? Absolutely breathtaking, one of my favorite places. Last week, a lot of things got done. And as I'm nearing the end of MVP features development, I find myself sort of doing many things in any given week. So I actually had to keep a list to keep track of what happened. There was a lot of refactoring last week, so a lot of UI improvements, usability improvements. Landing page, I added a OTP lockout mechanism. So that's just one other thing to prevent potential malicious users from abusing the backend that I will have. Again, keep in mind that this will be completely funded by me, and if somebody drains up my cloud credits, that would be quite painful. More importantly, one of the things that I did last week was actually adding static analysis tools to the code base. In other words, KT-lint as well as detect are in place. And before that, I was sort of doing a lot of freestyling with regards to my code. And, if there is unused imports, I didn't bother to get rid of them. If there are issues with formatting, I didn't bother to fix them. I just wanted the features to work. Now, most of the features are in place. I need to actually look into making sure that the code base is easy to read, and then, paving a better road for the future when I inevitably have to go back in and do debugging or feature additions. So static analysis tools are in place, KT-lint and detect. At this point, they're still running locally, but I'll talk about my plan with regards to what I plan to do in the CI/CD pipeline for them in a little bit. And yeah, I see a lot of refactoring essentially for last week from my list. And what did I learn last week? Many things, and I think some of the biggest lessons that I learned were actually dogfooding the app for myself. So before last week, I was developing the app as at least a UI component without actually using it, right? All the features were in place. In other words, if you wanted to do this, there's a button for that. If you wanted to do that, there's something else for that. But they weren't necessarily structured in a very intuitive and easy to use way. In other words, when a user actually opens up my app, it may not actually be as straightforward as it would appear to me. So last week I did a lot of sort of self-testing to make sure that, I was pretending to be a new user. If I were a new user and I opened this app, would I know what to do? Are those things clear enough? And that's why you saw a lot of UI refactoring for last week, because a lot of those things I didn't find to be intuitive to use. So obviously there will be user testing before the initial release, but I think last week I made a lot of progress in terms of improving the user experience. Hopefully, again, I'm still testing into the void and yelling into the void, and nobody's actually providing a soundboard for me, but that will come later down the line. And the goals for the next couple of weeks are actually going to be more and more interesting. So as a software engineer for a big company, usually your scope is very limited. For instance, when I was working for a big corporation, all that I needed to do was receiving tickets and then working on those tickets and pushing the changes to the repo, right? And those tickets were limited to, our team's UI elements, and there was really nothing beyond that. Occasionally you do some administrative things and you do some training and stuff, but that's sort of besides the core functions of your job. When you're writing an app for yourself and you intend to actually publish it and hopefully make it sustainable by developing a good business model around it, you'd have to worry a lot more than just writing the code. And I don't mean like, you have to worry about marketing and business side of things. I'm trying to not to think about those things for now, because I really have no experience in any of this business side of things, and I'll push it down the line when I come to it. Actually, I'm already coming to it, because I'm sort of designing the pricing strategies with regards to the features that I have, the differentiations of the user entitlements. But I'll reserve the discussion for a little later. Even on technical side of things, you have to deal a lot more than just software development. For instance, next week, one of the goals that I have in mind is actually exploring continuous delivery pipelines. Right? So for now, what happens is I write some changes in my code, and then I press build in the IDE, the integrated development environment, and then the local environment just builds the app for me and installs it on the emulator for me to play with, or on the physical device for me to play with. This is okay for local development, but once you start releasing things to people, you don't want to have to remember to build locally, to remember to increment the version numbers so that the app stores aren't confused with regards to what the binaries you're uploading to them. And then you have to worry about uploading the correct binaries to the respective stores. You don't want to, select a wrong file somewhere in your directory, right? So all of those things are very when you're doing those things manually, locally, they're very error prone. So next week, the goal is to figure out and hopefully implement a continuous delivery pipeline for my project. Preliminary research shows that I think most people for Kotlin multi-platform projects would use, and if you're pushing your repo onto GitHub, they would use GitHub Actions, and then they would use a GitHub provided runner. And my understanding is that they give you 2,000 minutes of build time, which probably is about 30 to 50 builds per month, and I think that's probably enough. Of course, you can pay for more builds, but for now, I want to keep the footprint small before I, the whole thing can just crash in flames. I don't really want to burn a lot of cloud credits just to see if the idea works. Anyway, so next week, explore the GitHub Actions, set up the runner, set up the CI/CD pipeline, and apply for the Google App Store and iOS App Store developer accounts. My last account got deactivated because I didn't use it for a long, long time. So I need to go through the application process again. Anyway, so a lot of the ancillary things that are not directly related to development, of course, I'll continue to do development, but I need to take care of sort of the tech business side of things for this project to proceed forward. A lot of things ahead and a lot of learning opportunities, and it's quite, I probably have learned more during this process than I have in my last over a decade of writing code, and it has been a very interesting and enjoyable experience. Somewhat frustrating at times, but so far so good. So this is it for this week. I'll see you next week.